Montana Territory, August 1876. Fletcher Hamilton had long believed that love was a luxury no cowboy could afford. At 25 years old, he had already buried 3 good men who had grown soft thinking about wives and homesteads instead of watching their backs. The frontier demanded your full attention, every waking moment, or it would kill you as sure as sunrise. That was the truth Fletcher clung to as he rode the boundaries of the Double H Ranch, scanning the horizon for cattle thieves and Sioux hunting parties with equal vigilance. The morning had started like any other. Fletcher rose before dawn in the cramped bunkhouse, pulled on his worn leather boots, and settled his black Stetson on his head before stepping into the cool August air. His sandy blonde hair, slightly long at the collar, caught the first rays of sunlight as he saddled his gelding, a reliable roan named Copper. His clean-shaven jaw was set with the grim determination of a man who expected trouble around every corner. At 6 feet tall with broad shoulders earned from years of ranch work, Fletcher looked every inch the capable cowboy, but his hazel eyes held a wariness that spoke of too much loss for such a young man. The Double H belonged to his uncle, Henry Hamilton, who had taken Fletcher in after Comanche raiders killed his parents 12 years ago. Fletcher owed everything to the old man, which was why he rode these fences religiously, why he never complained about the brutal work, and why he had sworn off any attachments that might distract him from protecting what was left of his family. His uncle had no sons, and Fletcher understood without it ever being said that the ranch would be his someday if he proved worthy, if he stayed alive, if he stayed focused. What Fletcher thought he wanted was simple enough: to expand the herd, to prove himself the best ranch hand in Montana Territory, to earn his uncle's respect and the deed to the Double H. What he needed, though he would never admit it even to himself, was someone to fill the hollow ache that settled in his chest when he lay awake at night listening to the wind howl across the plains, someone to make the endless cycle of survival mean something more than just not dying. The sun climbed higher as Fletcher guided Copper along the western fence line, checking for breaks in the barbed wire. The ranch sprawled across 5,000 acres of grassland, bordered by timber-covered hills to the north and a creek that ran year-round through the eastern pastures. It was good land, worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary. Fletcher had resigned himself to the probability that he would do exactly that someday, probably sooner rather than later. Men did not live to old age out here. They lived hard and died young, and if they were lucky, they died for something that mattered. He was about 3 miles from the main house when he heard the scream. Fletcher's hand went instinctively to the Colt revolver holstered at his hip as he spurred Copper toward the sound. Every nerve in his body fired with alert readiness. The scream had been high and feminine, cutting through the morning air with the unmistakable edge of terror. He crested a small rise and saw the source of the commotion in the shallow valley below. A covered wagon had overturned, its contents spilled across the grass. 2 horses, still hitched to the wagon, had tangled themselves in the traces and were thrashing wildly. A woman in a pale blue dress was trapped beneath one of the wagon wheels, and 3 men on horseback were circling her like wolves around wounded prey. Even from a distance, Fletcher recognized the riders as members of the Taggart gang, outlaws who had been terrorizing the territory for the past 6 months. Fletcher's first instinct was to ride away. 3 against 1 were not good odds, and drawing the attention of the Taggart gang was a death sentence. He thought of his uncle, alone at the ranch house except for 2 aging ranch hands. He thought of his promise to stay alive, to stay focused, to not take foolish risks. Getting involved with a stranger's problems was exactly the kind of distraction that got cowboys killed. But then the woman screamed again, and something in that sound bypassed every logical calculation in Fletcher's mind. He drew his rifle from the saddle holster, levered a round into the chamber, and sent Copper charging down the hillside. "Federal Marshal," Fletcher shouted, the lie coming easily. "Step away from the woman." The 3 outlaws turned in their saddles. Fletcher recognized the one in the middle as Cole Taggart himself, a barrel-chested man with a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. Taggart's hand moved toward his gun, but Fletcher fired a warning shot that kicked up dirt 2 feet in front of the outlaw's horse. "Next one goes through your chest," Fletcher called out, trying to keep his voice steady despite his hammering heart. I said step away. For a long moment, the world seemed to balance on a knife's edge. Fletcher could see Taggart calculating the odds, trying to decide if killing a federal marshal was worth whatever plunder they might get from the overturned wagon. Then Taggart spat in the dirt and gestured to his companions. This ain't over, Taggart said, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. I'll remember your face, lawman. The three riders wheeled their horses and galloped east, leaving a trail of dust in their wake. Fletcher kept his rifle trained on them until they disappeared over the horizon. Then he quickly dismounted and rushed to the woman trapped beneath the wagon wheel. Up close, she was breathtaking in a way that made Fletcher momentarily forget how to breathe. She appeared to be about 22 years old, with long blonde hair that had come loose from its pins and now spilled across the grass like liquid gold. Her face was pale with pain, but Fletcher could see the fine bone structure, the full lips, the large blue eyes that fixed on him with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. Her dress, though now torn and dirt-stained, was well-made, suggesting she came from money or at least comfort. "Please," she gasped, "I cannot feel my leg." Fletcher knelt beside her, assessing the situation. The wagon wheel rested partially on her right leg, just below the knee. "I am going to lift this," he said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "When I do, you need to pull yourself free." "Can you do that?" She nodded, biting her lower lip. Fletcher positioned himself, gripped the wagon bed, and heaved with all his strength. The wheel lifted perhaps 6 inches, and the woman immediately dragged herself backward across the grass. Fletcher held the wagon as long as he could, then let it drop, breathing hard from the effort. The woman sat up, clutching her leg. Fletcher could see a nasty bruise already forming, but there was no blood, no bone protruding through the skin. "Does it feel broken?" he asked. She moved her ankle experimentally, wincing. "I do not think so, just badly bruised." She looked up at him, and Fletcher felt something shift in his chest, like a key turning in a long-locked door. "You saved my life. Those men would have killed me." "Maybe," Fletcher said, standing and offering his hand to help her up. "More likely they would have robbed you and left you stranded. Either way, you are lucky I happened by." She took his hand, and when their skin touched, Fletcher felt a jolt of something he could not name, something that contradicted every belief he held about staying detached and focused. She rose unsteadily, favoring her injured leg, and Fletcher instinctively put his arm around her waist to support her. She leaned against him, and he caught the scent of lavender and something sweeter, maybe honeysuckle. "I am Catherine Wells," she said, looking up at him with those impossibly blue eyes. "My friends call me Catherine, never Kathy. I despise nicknames." "Fletcher Hamilton," he replied, "and I am not a federal marshal." "I lied to scare them off." Catherine's eyes widened slightly. "You risked your life for a stranger based on a lie." Seemed like the thing to do at the time. Fletcher looked around at the overturned wagon and scattered belongings. "What are you doing out here alone? This is dangerous country for a woman traveling without protection." Catherine's expression tightened. "I had protection, a guide named Samuel Jenkins, hired in Virginia City. This morning he demanded I pay him double what we agreed upon, and when I refused, he unhitched my horses from the wagon while I was inside and struck them with a whip. They bolted and overturned the wagon, and Jenkins rode off with everything I had already paid him." Fletcher felt anger rise in his chest. Jenkins was a known opportunist in Virginia City, but this level of cruelty was low even for him. "Where were you heading?" "A town called Ridgeway. I am supposed to meet my uncle there. He is the new schoolteacher and sent for me to join him and help establish the school. We are meant to open classes in September." Catherine's voice wavered slightly. "All my teaching materials were in the wagon, my books, my slate boards, everything." Fletcher walked to the overturned wagon and began sorting through the scattered contents. Most of Catherine's belongings had survived the crash intact. He found a trunk of clothing, several wooden crates packed with books, teaching supplies wrapped carefully in cloth, and a small leather case that contained what looked like personal letters and documents. The horses had calmed now that no one was threatening them, and Fletcher worked to untangle their traces and check them for injuries. "You are fortunate," he said as he worked. "The horses are sound and most of your things seem undamaged. The wagon's front axle is cracked, though. It will need repair before it can travel." Catherine limped over, still favoring her bruised leg. "How far is it to Ridgeway?" "About 30 miles north." Fletcher studied the position of the sun. "Too far to walk, especially with an injured leg. The nearest town is Stillwater, about 8 miles east, but I would not recommend going there. It is full of men like those who just rode off." "What do you recommend, then?" Catherine asked, and Fletcher heard the edge of fear beneath her brave front. He should tell her to wait here while he rode to get help. He should maintain distance, offer minimal assistance, and send her on her way as quickly as possible. Instead, he heard himself say, "My uncle's ranch is about 3 miles west. We can get a wagon there to transport your belongings, and you can rest while we arrange for your wagon to be repaired. Then I will escort you to Ridgeway myself." Catherine met his eyes, and Fletcher saw the internal debate playing out behind those blue depths. She was calculating whether she could trust him, a stranger who had already admitted to lying, but what choice did she have? "Thank you," she said finally. "I accept your generous offer." Fletcher loaded what he could onto Copper, including Catherine's most valuable possessions, then fashioned a temporary travois from broken wagon pieces to drag behind the horse. He helped Catherine onto Copper's saddle, then led the horse on foot back toward the Double H. The journey took nearly an hour, and the sun was high by the time they crested the final rise and the ranch buildings came into view. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure built from local timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. A barn, bunkhouse, smokehouse, and various outbuildings dotted the property. Cattle grazed in the near pastures, and Fletcher could see his uncle standing near the corral, talking with one of the ranch hands. Henry Hamilton looked up as Fletcher approached leading Copper with a strange woman in the saddle. The old man's weathered face registered surprise, then concern. He was 63 years old, still strong despite his age, with a full head of white hair and keen gray eyes that missed nothing. "Fletcher," Henry called out. "What have you brought us?" Fletcher explained the situation quickly while helping Catherine down from the saddle. His uncle listened with the patient attention of a man accustomed to frontier emergencies, nodding occasionally. When Fletcher finished, Henry turned to Catherine and removed his hat. "Miss Wells, you are welcome at the Double H as long as you need. My late wife, God rest her soul, would have taken a switch to me if I turned away a woman in need. Fletcher, get Miss Wells settled in the guest room. I will send someone to retrieve her wagon and belongings." Relief flooded Catherine's face. "Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Your kindness is overwhelming." "Just common decency, miss." "Fletcher will show you inside. We will speak more at supper." Fletcher led Catherine into the house, acutely aware of her hand resting lightly on his arm as she limped beside him. The interior was clean but sparse, furnished with the practical pieces of men who lived alone. Fletcher's aunt had died 7 years ago, and the feminine touches she had added had slowly disappeared, leaving behind a house that was functional but not quite a home. The guest room was on the first floor, originally built for Henry's wife when her arthritis had made climbing stairs difficult. It contained a bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the eastern pastures. Fletcher set Catherine's leather case on the dresser. "It is not much," he said, suddenly self-conscious about the rough accommodations compared to what she might be used to. "It is perfect," Catherine said, and the genuine warmth in her voice made Fletcher believe she meant it. She turned to face him fully, and in the close confines of the small room, Fletcher was overwhelmingly aware of her presence. "You risked your life for me today, Mr. Hamilton. I do not know how I can ever repay such a debt." "Fletcher," he said, "just call me Fletcher, and you do not owe me anything. Any decent man would have done the same." "That has not been my experience." Something dark flickered across Catherine's face, some memory or pain she did not elaborate on. "The world is not as full of decent men as you might think." Before Fletcher could respond, his uncle called from downstairs that he was sending 2 men to retrieve the wagon. Fletcher excused himself, suddenly needing distance from Catherine and the confusing feelings her presence stirred up. He spent the rest of the afternoon working with unusual intensity, repairing fence posts that did not truly need repairing, checking cattle that had already been checked, anything to avoid thinking about the beautiful stranger now residing under his uncle's roof. But when evening came and Fletcher walked into the dining room, all his efforts at distraction proved useless. Catherine had changed into a clean dress, dark green with small buttons up the front, and had brushed her blonde hair until it shone in the lamplight. She had pulled it back with a simple ribbon, and a few loose strands framed her face. When she smiled at Fletcher, he felt that locked door in his chest swing open wider, and for the first time in 12 years, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong about love and the frontier. Supper was beef stew and biscuits, simple food but well prepared by Henry's housekeeper, a widow named Mrs. Chen who came up from town 3 times a week. Catherine ate with good appetite, answering Henry's questions about her journey west and her plans for the school in Ridgeway. She was articulate and educated, and Fletcher found himself hanging on her every word. "My uncle wrote that Ridgeway is a growing community," Catherine explained. "They have a church, a general store, a doctor, and now they want a proper school. He secured funding from several wealthy families in town who want their children educated beyond basic letters and numbers. I studied at a women's seminary in Philadelphia for 3 years. I am qualified to teach literature, mathematics, history, and music." "Philadelphia," Henry said thoughtfully, "long way from Montana Territory. What made you leave?" Catherine's hands tightened slightly on her fork. "My father passed away last winter. He was a professor of literature at the university. After his death, there was nothing to keep me there. My mother died when I was quite young, and I have no siblings. When my uncle wrote and offered me a position at his school, it seemed like Providence providing a fresh start." Fletcher heard the grief beneath her words, the loneliness of someone who had lost everything and was trying to rebuild from nothing. He knew that feeling intimately. "I am sorry about your father," he said quietly. Catherine met his eyes across the table. "Thank you. I am sorry for whatever loss I see reflected in your own eyes, Fletcher Hamilton." The moment stretched between them, something unspoken but profound passing in that shared glance. Henry cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "Well, Miss Wells, you are welcome to stay here until your wagon is repaired and you are ready to travel. Fletcher can escort you to Ridgeway. Those 30 miles can be treacherous, especially with the Taggart gang working the territory." "I do not wish to impose," Catherine said. "You have already been so generous." "No imposition at all," Henry assured her. "Been too long since we had pleasant company at this table. Does an old man good to have conversation beyond cattle and weather?" After supper, Fletcher stepped out onto the porch for some air and found Catherine already there, standing at the railing and looking out at the darkening landscape. The sun had set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, and the first stars were appearing overhead. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "I have never seen anything like this," she said, gesturing to the vast expanse of grassland stretching to the horizon. "In Philadelphia, you could barely see the sky between the buildings. Here, it feels like the sky goes on forever." Fletcher leaned against the porch post, maintaining a careful distance. "Takes some getting used to. All this space. Do you like it, living out here?" It was a simple question, but Fletcher found himself considering it seriously for the first time in years. "I do not know if like is the right word. It is what I know, what I am good at. The frontier does not care about your feelings, only whether you are strong enough to survive it." Catherine studied him with those penetrating blue eyes. "That sounds like a lonely way to live." "Lonely is safe." "Lonely means you do not have anything to lose." The words came out harsher than Fletcher intended, and he saw Catherine flinch slightly. "I thought that way for a while after my father died," she said softly. "That if I just closed myself off completely, I would never hurt again. But then I realized that living without connection, without joy, without hope, that is not living at all. It is just existing. And we are meant for more than mere existence, do you not think?" Fletcher wanted to argue, to defend the walls he had built around his heart, but something in Catherine's words resonated with that hollow ache he carried. Before he could formulate a response, his uncle stepped out onto the porch. "Fletcher, I need you to ride out at first light and check on the north pasture. I have heard reports of wolves in the area. Take your rifle and be careful." "Yes, sir." Fletcher was almost grateful for the interruption. "Miss Wells, I bid you good night." "Good night, Fletcher." He lay awake for a long time in his bunk, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. He kept thinking about Catherine's words, about existing versus living, about the way she had looked at him across the dinner table like she could see right through his carefully constructed armor. He told himself it did not matter. She would be gone in a few days, off to Ridgeway to start her new life, and he would return to his routine of fence riding and surviving. That was how it had to be. But when he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of blonde hair and blue eyes and a smile that made him think maybe he had been wrong about everything. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended kind of existence. Catherine's wagon required more extensive repairs than initially thought, which meant she remained at the Double H longer than expected. Fletcher found himself inventing excuses to be near the main house instead of out on the range. He volunteered to repair the porch steps, which did not actually need repairing. He suddenly remembered urgent business with his uncle that required multiple trips inside throughout the day. He even found himself at dinner every evening, something he had rarely done before, usually preferring to eat with the other ranch hands in the bunkhouse. Catherine seemed equally drawn to his company. She would appear at the corral fence while he worked with the horses, asking questions about ranch life and listening with genuine interest to his answers. She helped Mrs. Chen with kitchen tasks and spoke of her plans for the school with an enthusiasm that made Fletcher believe she could actually transform a rough frontier town through the power of education alone. She read aloud on the porch in the evenings, her voice bringing poetry and literature to life in a way that made even his uncle pause to listen. On the third evening, Fletcher found Catherine in the barn, examining a litter of barn kittens that had been born 2 weeks prior. She was kneeling in the hay, her green dress dusty, completely absorbed in the tiny creatures mewing around their mother. "They are so small," she said when Fletcher approached, "so helpless. How do they survive out here?" "Their mother protects them, teaches them to hunt. By next month they will be catching mice and earning their keep." Fletcher crouched down beside her, picking up one of the kittens. It fit in the palm of his hand, its eyes barely open, tiny claws kneading the air. "Do you think she ever regrets it?" Catherine asked. "The mother cat, bringing life into such a harsh world." Fletcher considered the question. "I think she probably does not think that way. She just does what instinct tells her. Protect, feed, nurture. The rest takes care of itself." Catherine reached out and gently stroked the kitten in Fletcher's hand. Her fingers brushed against his palm, and Fletcher felt that now familiar jolt of electricity. "I used to think I would have children someday," Catherine said quietly, "a whole house full of them. But then my father died, and I realized how fragile everything is, how quickly you can lose the people you love, and I wondered if it was selfish to bring children into a world with so much pain." Fletcher set the kitten down gently and turned to face Catherine fully. They were very close in the dim barn, close enough that he could see the flecks of darker blue in her eyes, the faint dusting of freckles across her nose. "Your father loved you, did he not?" "More than anything." "Then I imagine if you asked him, he would say that having you, loving you, even knowing he would lose you someday, was worth every moment of joy and every second of pain." "Love is not selfish, Catherine. Withholding love because you are afraid, that is what is selfish." Catherine's breath caught, and Fletcher realized he was not just talking about her theoretical children. He was talking about them, about the connection growing between them that both thrilled and terrified him. "Fletcher," she whispered, "what are we doing?" "I do not know," he admitted. "You are leaving in a few days. I am staying here." "This cannot lead anywhere." "Cannot or should not?" "Both, neither. I have spent 12 years believing that attachment was weakness on the frontier. That caring about someone made you vulnerable, made you lose focus, got you killed. And then you came along, and every time I look at you, every time I hear your voice, that belief cracks a little more." Catherine reached up and touched his face, her hand warm against his cheek. "What if you were wrong? What if love is not weakness but strength? What if having someone to fight for, to live for, to build a life with, what if that is what makes survival meaningful?" Fletcher wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to believe her. But 12 years of ingrained fear could not be undone in 3 days. "Catherine, you do not understand. This land takes everything. My parents, my aunt, 3 friends I rode with. The frontier does not care about love. It just keeps taking until there is nothing left." "Then we fight back," Catherine said fiercely. "We love anyway, we build anyway, we refuse to let the harshness win." Fletcher leaned forward, drawn by a force stronger than his will, and kissed her. Catherine's lips were soft and warm, and she melted against him with a small sound that made Fletcher's heart race. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened as 12 years of loneliness met months of grief, and somehow transformed into something that felt startlingly like hope. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against Catherine's. "I am terrified," he admitted. "So am I," she whispered. "But I would rather be terrified and alive than safe and empty. Fletcher, when I look at you, I see a future I thought I had given up on. I see a home. I see someone worth staying for. Your uncle is expecting you in Ridgeway, the school. My uncle would understand, the school will still be there. But this, what we have, how often does this come along? What if you are my second chance, Fletcher? What if I am yours?" Fletcher wanted to argue, to point out all the logical reasons why this was impossible. But then Catherine kissed him again, and all his carefully constructed defenses crumbled into dust. When they finally left the barn, hand in hand, the sun had set and stars blanketed the Montana sky. Fletcher felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Henry noticed the change immediately. At breakfast the next morning, he watched Fletcher and Catherine exchange glances across the table, saw the way his nephew's entire face softened when the young woman smiled. After Catherine excused herself to get ready for the day, Henry poured himself another cup of coffee and fixed Fletcher with a knowing look. "You have feelings for her." It was not a question. Fletcher nodded slowly. "I know it is foolish." "She is leaving soon, heading to Ridgeway." "Is she?" Henry sipped his coffee. "Seems to me she might change those plans if given a reason." "Uncle, I cannot ask her to stay. She came west for a fresh start, for a purpose. I cannot ask her to give up her dreams." Henry set down his cup with more force than necessary. "Boy, I have watched you close yourself off since the day those Comanche raiders killed your parents. I understood why, even supported it because I wanted you to survive, to be tough enough for this land. But surviving is not the same as living. Your aunt used to say that this territory was hard enough without us making it harder by denying ourselves joy when it came along. If you have found something real with Miss Wells, do not let fear or misguided nobility make you throw it away." Fletcher started to respond, but the sound of hoofbeats outside cut him short. Both men moved to the window and saw 3 riders approaching the house at a gallop. Fletcher recognized Cole Taggart immediately, and his blood ran cold. The outlaw had brought 2 more men with him this time, all heavily armed. "Get Catherine and Mrs. Chen into the back room," Fletcher said quietly, his hand moving to his revolver. "Do not let them come out no matter what you hear." Henry nodded and hurried to comply while Fletcher stepped out onto the porch, positioning himself at the top of the steps. The 3 outlaws pulled their horses to a stop in the yard, keeping their hands visible on their saddle horns but clearly ready to draw their weapons. "Morning, lawman," Taggart called out, his scarred face twisting into something that might have been a smile. "Except you are not really a lawman, are you? I made some inquiries. You are just a cowboy with more courage than sense." "State your business, Taggart, then ride off my uncle's land." "Your uncle's land," Taggart repeated. "See, that is the thing. I heard about a real pretty blonde woman staying here. Same woman I had business with few days back before you interrupted. I am thinking she might have something valuable with her, something worth coming all this way from Philadelphia. Family jewels, maybe, or inheritance money. Fletcher's mind raced. How had Taggart learned Catherine's history so quickly? Then he remembered Jenkins, the guide who had abandoned Catherine. The man must have sold information about her to the outlaws. There is nothing here for you. The woman is under my protection. Your protection, one of the other outlaws sneered. You and what army, boy? The situation was escalating rapidly. Fletcher knew he could draw and maybe take down one, possibly two of them before they shot him. But that would leave one alive to storm the house, and he could not risk Catherine or his uncle being hurt. He needed to stall to find some advantage. You know Cole Taggart, do you? Fletcher called out conversationally. Man with a $500 bounty on his head from the territorial marshal. I would be happy to collect that bounty, if you gentlemen want to make this interesting. It was a bluff and Taggart knew it, but the outlaw's eyes narrowed. You are a cool customer, I will give you that. But you are also a dead man, if you do not produce that woman in the next 30 seconds. That will not be happening. A rifle shot cracked through the air, kicking up dirt right between Taggart's horse's front hooves. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider. Fletcher glanced quickly toward the barn and saw two of his fellow ranch hands, Pete and Manuel, positioned with rifles. Henry must have sent word to them. Suddenly the odds had shifted dramatically. Seems like I do have an army, Fletcher said calmly, and you gentlemen are now covered by 3 rifles. Your move, Taggart. For a long moment the standoff held. Fletcher could see Taggart calculating, weighing greed against survival. Then the outlaw spat in the dirt and gathered his reins. This is not over, Hamilton. I know where you live now. I know she is here. We will be back. We will be ready. The 3 outlaws wheeled their horses and galloped off, but Fletcher knew Taggart meant every word of his threat. They would be back, probably with more men. The Double H Ranch had just become a target, and it was all because Fletcher had chosen to help a stranger. Part of him immediately thought, see, this is what attachment gets you. Danger and complications. But then Catherine appeared in the doorway behind him, her face pale but determined, and Fletcher realized he did not regret his choice for a single second. That man from the wagon, Catherine said. He came for me. He came for what he thinks you have, money or valuables. Jenkins must have told him about you. Fletcher turned to face her fully. Catherine, I need you to be honest with me. Did you bring anything of significant value from Philadelphia? Anything that would make Taggart this determined? Catherine hesitated, and in that moment Fletcher's heart sank. She was hiding something. I have some jewelry that belonged to my mother, she said finally. Nothing of great monetary value, but sentimental worth to me, and I have about $200 in cash that my father left me. It was meant to help me get established out west. $200 was not nothing, but it was hardly worth Taggart's persistent interest. Fletcher studied Catherine's face and saw the truth there. She was telling him part of the story, but not all of it. What else? He asked gently. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. My father did not just die, Fletcher, he was murdered. In Philadelphia, by a man who believed my father had information about a gold claim out west. Before he died, the man who killed my father was arrested and hanged, but not before he told others about the gold. There is a letter hidden among my belongings that supposedly contains the location of a substantial claim in Montana territory. I think Jenkins saw it while rifling through my things, and he must have told Taggart. Fletcher felt the ground shift beneath his feet. This was so much worse than he had imagined. Do you have this letter? Yes, it is in my leather case, sewn into the lining. I brought it west because I thought perhaps I could file a proper claim, turn it over to the authorities, something that would bring justice for my father's death. But honestly, I do not even know if the gold is real, or if it is just a fantasy that got my father killed. It does not matter if it is real, Fletcher said grimly. What matters is that Taggart thinks it is real. He will not stop coming after you, Catherine. Even if you give him the letter, he might kill you just to eliminate any witnesses to his claim. Catherine wrapped her arms around herself. I am so sorry, Fletcher. I have brought this danger to your family, to you. I should leave immediately, go to Ridgeway as planned. No, Fletcher surprised himself with the vehemence of his response. Taggart knows where you are heading. He will have men watching the road. You would never make it to Ridgeway alive. Then what do we do? Henry stepped out onto the porch, followed by Pete and Manuel. The old rancher's face was grave. We defend the ranch and send for the territorial marshal. There is a deputy stationed in Stillwater. If we can get word to him, he can bring reinforcements. Stillwater is 8 miles, Manuel said. If Taggart has men watching the roads, they will stop any messenger. Then we go cross-country, Fletcher said. I know these hills better than any outsider. I can reach Stillwater by tomorrow morning if I leave now. You will be gone overnight, Henry said, leaving us short-handed if Taggart returns. I know, but what choice do we have? We cannot hold off a determined attack indefinitely, and we cannot let Catherine be taken. Fletcher turned to his uncle. I need you to promise me something. If Taggart comes back before I return with help, you get Catherine out of here. There is a cave in the hills about 2 miles northeast, hidden in a grove of pine trees. Take her there and wait until it is safe. Henry nodded slowly. I promise. Fletcher went inside to prepare for the ride, and Catherine followed him. In his small room in the bunkhouse, she watched as he gathered supplies, checked his weapons, filled his canteen. You are doing this for me, she said quietly. I am doing this because it is the right thing to do. Fletcher looked up from his preparations and saw the guilt and fear on Catherine's face. He crossed to her and took her hands in his. Listen to me, what happened to your father was not your fault, and this situation with Taggart is not your fault either. You are a woman alone trying to survive on the frontier, and you did nothing wrong. If I had just told you about the letter immediately, you could have made a different choice about helping me. You could have stayed safe. Catherine, I made my choice the moment I heard you scream. Before I knew anything about you, before I knew about gold or danger or complications. I chose to help you because that is who I am, and I do not regret it. He squeezed her hands gently. When I get back, we need to talk about what comes next, for both of us. But right now, I need you to be strong and trust my uncle. He will keep you safe. Catherine pulled her hands free and wrapped her arms around Fletcher's neck, hugging him tightly. He held her close, breathing in the scent of lavender, committing the feel of her to memory in case something went wrong. Come back to me, she whispered against his neck. Please, Fletcher. Come back. I promise, he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Fletcher left within the hour, taking copper and following a route through the hills that would keep him away from main trails. The journey was arduous, requiring him to navigate steep terrain in failing light, but he pushed on through the night. By dawn, he rode into Stillwater, exhausted but alive. The deputy marshal, a capable man named Samuel Brooks, listened to Fletcher's story with growing concern. The Taggart gang has been escalating their activities, Brooks said. If they are targeting your ranch specifically, they must believe this gold claim is legitimate. I can gather 6 men and ride back with you, but it will take us most of the day to reach the Double H. Can your people hold out that long? They will have to, Fletcher said grimly. Back at the ranch, dawn broke with ominous quiet. Henry had positioned Pete and Manuel at strategic points with rifles, and he had made certain Catherine understood the location of the cave in case evacuation became necessary. Mrs. Chen had insisted on staying to cook and maintain some semblance of normalcy, and no amount of argument could convince her otherwise. Catherine spent the morning helping prepare for a potential siege. She helped Mrs. Chen fill every available container with water, gathered medical supplies in case of injuries, and even learned how to load and fire Henry's spare rifle. The physical activity helped keep her fear at bay, but every moment that passed without word from Fletcher made her heart clench tighter. It was mid-afternoon when the attack came. Catherine was in the kitchen when she heard Henry shout a warning. She ran to the window and saw at least 8 riders approaching the ranch at a gallop. Taggart rode at the front, and this time there was no pretense of negotiation. The outlaws opened fire while still 50 yards out, bullets slamming into the house and barn. "Get to the back room," Henry shouted, returning fire from the front window. Catherine hesitated, wanting to help, but Mrs. Chen grabbed her arm and dragged her toward the rear of the house. They huddled in the small room Fletcher had specified, listening to the terrifying sounds of gunfire and shouting. The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably closer to 20 minutes. Catherine heard glass breaking, wood splintering, and the constant crack of rifles. Then suddenly a new sound joined the chaos, more hoofbeats and a voice shouting, "Federal marshals. Drop your weapons." Fletcher had returned, and he had brought help. Catherine ran to the window in time to see Fletcher and 6 other riders charging into the yard, catching the Taggart gang in a crossfire between the house and the newly arrived lawmen. The outlaws, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, immediately tried to flee. 2 were shot from their saddles. 3 more, including Cole Taggart, threw down their weapons and raised their hands in surrender. The remaining 3 managed to escape, galloping off toward the hills. "Let them go," Deputy Brooks ordered. "We have the leaders, that will break the gang." Catherine burst out of the house and ran across the yard to where Fletcher was dismounting from Copper. She threw herself into his arms and Fletcher caught her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You came back," she sobbed against his chest. "I was so afraid." "I promised," Fletcher said, stroking her hair. "I promised I would come back to you." Henry emerged from the house, a bandage around his left arm where a bullet had grazed him, but otherwise unharmed. Pete and Manuel were similarly battered but alive. Mrs. Chen appeared with water and bandages, immediately taking charge of treating the wounded. Deputy Brooks and his men secured the prisoners and began the process of documenting the scene. As the adrenaline faded, reality set in. Catherine still had the letter that had caused all this trouble, and she had no idea what to do with it. That evening, after the prisoners had been taken away and the deputy marshal had departed with promises to return for statements, Catherine sat with Fletcher and Henry on the porch and showed them the letter. It was written in her father's careful handwriting and contained detailed instructions for locating a gold claim in the hills north of Helena. According to the letter, her father had filed the claim legally, but had hidden its location to prevent anyone from jumping it before he could travel west himself. The claim was meant to be Catherine's inheritance, a way to secure her future after he was gone. "Your father wanted you to have security," Henry said gently. "This gold could make you a wealthy woman, Catherine." "It got my father killed," Catherine said bitterly. "And it nearly got all of you killed too. I want nothing to do with it." "That is your choice to make," Fletcher said. "But consider this, you could use that money to build the school in Ridgeway, a real school better than anything they have now. You could provide education for every child in the territory if you wanted to. Turn something that caused death into something that brings life." Catherine looked at Fletcher, seeing the wisdom in his words. "Would you come with me?" "To find the claim and file the paperwork properly. I cannot do this alone, Fletcher. I do not want to do any of this alone anymore." Fletcher glanced at his uncle, who nodded encouragingly. "The ranch will survive a few weeks without you, boy. Go help the lady, claim what is rightfully hers." Over the next 3 weeks, Fletcher and Catherine, accompanied by Deputy Brooks for security, traveled to Helena and located the gold claim described in the letter. It was real and it was substantial. More importantly, Catherine's father had done everything legally, which meant she was the rightful heir. The claim was filed in her name, and she immediately made arrangements to sell the mining rights to a reputable company for a sum that made her financially independent for life. During those 3 weeks, traveling together through the Montana wilderness, Fletcher and Catherine grew even closer. They talked for hours around campfires, sharing their fears and dreams, and slowly building a foundation of trust that went deeper than attraction or circumstance. Fletcher told her about his parents' death, about the guilt he carried for surviving when they had not, about his fear that loving someone would mean losing them. Catherine shared her own grief over her father, her loneliness in Philadelphia after his death, and her terror during the journey west when she realized how truly vulnerable she was. "But then you appeared," she said one night, the firelight dancing across her beautiful face. "Like an answer to a prayer I had not even known I was praying. You made me believe in the possibility of happiness again, Fletcher. In the possibility of home." "I have been thinking about that," Fletcher said carefully. "About home. I always thought the double H was my home, that the land itself was what mattered. But being with you these past weeks, I have realized that home is not a place. It is a person. You are my home, Catherine. Wherever you are, that is where I want to be." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Fletcher Hamilton, is that your awkward way of proposing to me?" Fletcher laughed, the sound rusty from disuse but genuine. "I suppose it is. Not very romantic, is it? I should probably get down on one knee or something." "I do not need romantic gestures," Catherine said, moving closer to him across the campfire. "I just need you. Honest and real and willing to build a life with me, whatever that looks like. So yes, Fletcher, yes, I will marry you, yes to everything." They were married in Helena by a circuit preacher, before returning to the Double H. Catherine wore a simple white dress purchased from the general store, and Fletcher wore his best shirt and newly cleaned boots. Deputy Brooks served as a witness, along with Henry, who had ridden up to attend the ceremony. It was not fancy or elaborate, but when Fletcher kissed his bride, he felt a sense of rightness that went bone deep. The newlyweds returned to the Double H, but they did not stay long. Catherine still wanted to teach, and Fletcher had developed a new vision for their future. Using a portion of the money from the gold claim, they purchased land just outside Ridgeway and built both a home and a schoolhouse. The school opened in the spring of 1877, and Catherine's dream of educating frontier children became reality. Fletcher discovered he had a talent for carpentry and building, and he established a business constructing homes and buildings for the growing community. He stayed connected to the ranch, visiting his uncle regularly and helping during busy seasons, but his life had taken a new direction. He was building something permanent, something meaningful, something that mattered beyond mere survival. 2 years after their wedding, Catherine gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Grace. 2 years after that, a son they named Henry William arrived. The school prospered, eventually requiring Catherine to hire additional teachers to handle the growing enrollment. Fletcher's construction business thrived as Ridgeway expanded from a small town into a bustling community. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Fletcher and Catherine sat on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set over the Montana landscape. Catherine leaned against Fletcher's shoulder, completely content. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, "giving up the cowboy life, the ranch?" Fletcher considered the question seriously, as he always did with Catherine. "Not for a single moment. I thought I knew what mattered, survival, the land, proving myself worthy. But you taught me that what really matters is love, family, and building something that lasts beyond our own lives. Every morning I wake up beside you. I am grateful for the day you changed my fate." "We changed each other's fate," Catherine corrected gently. "I came west running from grief, and I found joy. You were hiding from love, and you found courage. We saved each other, Fletcher." "That we did," Fletcher agreed, kissing the top of her head. "That we did." The sun continued its descent, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Inside the house, Fletcher could hear the sounds of domestic life, dishes being washed, children laughing, a home filled with warmth and love. The frontier was still harsh, still demanding, still capable of taking everything from those who were not prepared. But Fletcher had learned that the frontier could also give back. It could give second chances and new beginnings. It could give love to those brave enough to reach for it. He had thought it was just another day when he heard Catherine's scream echoing across the grasslands. He had thought he was simply helping a stranger, nothing more. He had been so wrong. That day had been the beginning of everything, of love, of family, of a life that mattered beyond simple survival. Fletcher had spent years believing that attachment was weakness, that love was a luxury no cowboy could afford. But Catherine had proven that love was not weakness at all. It was the strongest force on the frontier, capable of transforming fear into courage, loneliness into belonging, and existence into a life fully lived. As darkness fell and stars began to appear overhead, Fletcher and Catherine walked hand in hand into their home, their children running ahead of them. The door closed behind them, shutting out the vast wilderness and enclosing them in warmth and light. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new opportunities to build and grow. But tonight there was only this, a family gathered together, safe and loved and home. And that, Fletcher thought as he pulled Catherine close and watched his children play before the fire, was everything that truly mattered. The cowboy who had believed he was destined to live and die alone had found something infinitely more valuable than survival. He had found a life worth living, and a love worth every risk he had taken to claim it. The frontier could take many things, but it could not take this. Not the home they had built, not the family they had created, not the love that had survived every hardship and emerged stronger for it. Fletcher Hamilton had learned the hardest and most beautiful lesson the West had to teach. That sometimes the greatest act of courage was not facing down outlaws or surviving harsh conditions, but opening your heart to another person and daring to build a future together. And he had never been more grateful for anything in his life.